Listen, first time talking to this fella on Philly Philly with John Marks. Let's please welcome to the program contributor at PHLY, Les Bowen. What's up, Les?
Hey, John, how are you?
Good. I saw you tweet out that you were actually covering the Pete Rose gambling announcement. I guess in 1989 for the Philadelphia Daily News. So I'm sure
I was actually a youngish sports writer back then.
Wow. So like me, Les, I was like, my first memories of life were the Phillies winning the World Series and Pete Rose bouncing the ball off the vet turf and everything else. He was an icon to me. But then, later in life, you realize what he really was, what came with it. But you were a professional covering it. What was it like for you learning that he passed away? And what were the emotions that went through you when you saw it?
I was really surprised. There was a story in the Inquirer just the other day about his grandson, who's going to play baseball. LaSalle is reinstating its baseball program, and Pete's grandson is going to play for them. And there was a lot of talk about Pete in the story. And, I don't think there was any. It's not been, I've never seen anything that I think he was still making appearances and stuff like that. So, I was surprised, but also it's a really sad story. And it's a story, Pete, there was a sort of vicious relentlessness to Pete that worked very well on the field, will help you win in a competitive situation, but in other areas of life is less admirable. And he was just a really cold, ruthless person, that summer of '89 was really one of the strangest experiences of my life. I went to court proceedings in Ohio. I went to Reds games. I went and interviewed the bookie, Ron Peters, who was at the center of the case. And then I went to New York and listened to Giamatti, Bart Giamatti, Paul Giamatti's dad, give this long, very eloquent speech banning Pete from baseball. And then Giamatti died like a week later.
Unbelievable.
So I have a lot of memories of that, and it's all very, to this day, it's one of the strangest things. And I've covered some strange things in my life, but that was really memorable, and I came away with it just thinking what a terrible thing it was to muddle your legacy that well. I mean, let's be clear, he was thrown out for gambling on baseball, not just baseball, but betting for the Reds to lose.
Yeah.
On days when he didn't have the right starting pitcher or something like that. That's no.
Read the Dowd. Les, I know you've read the Dowd report. Read the Dowd report. We're talking about multiple bookies, multiple middlemen. This guy was a degenerate gambler. And you know what, Les? If he comes out and says, I had a gambling problem. I was out of control. I'm getting help for it. He didn't do that. He denied for years and years and years that he did it until a book came out where he made money that he finally admitted it. Right. And up until probably his death, he was a gambler. He was a degenerate gambler.
Yeah, and that rush, that high of competition is something that's hard to chase once you become an older person. And I think that was maybe his only way of even toward the end of his playing career. I think one of the real, I don't want to besmirch his baseball legacy at all, his hitting legacy, but I think it's well known within the baseball community that he only broke Ty Cobb's record, which was an unreachable record, because he was the manager of the Reds these last few years.
Right.
And he wrote his name in the lineup every day, at least a year after he was really a good enough hitter to be an everyday baseball player.
Hey, he's 45.
He was great until way past 40.
Yeah.
But he wasn't great till like 45.
No, he wasn't.
And it was even in baseball, it was a complicated legacy. There was Ray Fosse, the guy whose career he kind of ruined by nearly killing him in an all-star game.
Right.
It was he was unique, I think, would be one way to put it.
Yep. And we'll wrap it up on this. I don't feel bad for Pete that he didn't make the Hall of Fame. I feel bad for baseball fans because they seem to oh, what he
Right.
did on the field, he deserves to be in there. But I'm sorry, you can't take away with him being a manager and even betting on your own team. You can't do it. And the fact that he never owned up to it until many years later, and he didn't. There was a path for him to get into the Hall of Fame, and he never took it. And Mike Schmidt tried to help him with it. I know a lot of his ex-teammates who loved him tried to help him, but he couldn't get out of his own way. He really couldn't, Les. I mean, he was it. More than one person that played with him and knew him told me that his biggest problem was he was a lot dumber than he thought he was. Not an intelligent person.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I feel bad for Cincinnati in that he was like the biggest sports icon of that city, and to have that all turn like it did, it's almost a little bit like it's not a complete analogy, but Bill Cosby in Philly. To have somebody that was like really revered and held up as one of our greatest products and so forth, and then have something really awful come out about him, is it's
tragic. It's tragic to us. I actually brought up Bill earlier with how now when he passes away, it's not going to be about the Jell-O Cosby show comedian, huge star. It's going to be about that, as it should be a part of that. But it's sad all around. Before I get to the Eagles stuff, because you said it was one of the more weird things that you covered with Pete Rose. Les, I thought of you yesterday when I was watching the Doug Peterson press conference. And it takes me back to his final year in Philadelphia, where he's being asked about Brett Favre's comments with Nick Foles and Carson Wentz, and he can't answer the question of, and you say, well, Doug, you're not saying that you agree with Brett Favre and what he had to say. And even then he couldn't say, no, I don't agree with Brett Favre. It took Rob Motti throwing him a lifeline to where he came out and he said, no, of course I don't agree with that. But that was a rough run for Doug, and it seems like he's going through that right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on down there in Jacksonville, but again, what kills a coach is when you're brought in to develop a young quarterback and the young quarterback doesn't develop.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened with Carson Wentz in Philly, whether it was Doug's fault or not, and it's what's happening in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence is off to a horrible start this year. People are making fun of him, and obviously Trevor Lawrence is talented. I think he's shown that. Doug's going to get fired unless this turns completely. We are only 4 games into the season, but Jacksonville looks horrible. And, Doug's been there a while now. And, no.
Going in the wrong direction, Les.
Doug probably doesn't get another head coaching job after this, unless he goes back and works as a coordinator somewhere. Maybe for Andy again or something. Maybe he doesn't get another. Maybe he's like Spags and, he's just a coordinator from now on or something. But it's not going at all well for Doug. And he's a good guy. And it's a sad thing. But Doug won the Super Bowl here, and he'll always be an icon for that. I never thought he was a genius as a coach, I thought he was a good coach in many ways, but not Andy, not Bill Belichick, not somebody on that level.
It fell apart, which is the perfect segue into this year. And I was thinking about this. It's so weird how the Eagles can't sustain something now,
right?
With Howie Roseman. They'll have their run. That was 2022. They'll regress in 2023, and now does this year turn into the disaster? We saw it with Doug. And I'm starting to worry that that's the case. And I'm starting to worry that Nick Sirianni is the new Doug Peterson. He's not calling plays. It's not his offense. He's been given the unfortunate task of being the CEO. And so now everybody's examining and microscoping everything that he does because we're not sure what else he does. Les, I worry that the locker room rolls their eyes at him. The message isn't being received. And just that his players don't think that he's the smartest coach. And in the NFL, this is a year-to-year league. Guys don't have guaranteed contracts. If you're on a bad team, you're costing yourself money. And I worry that the players have already tuned him out. You've covered this team for decades. Right. How do you view Nick Sirianni right now, and how does it kind of apply to what you think you're going to see this year?
Well, it's hard for me to really gauge what the players think right now because obviously I'm not down there a lot. But you hear them give testimonials to him. Sometimes that means something. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just what they think they're supposed to say. The thing with Hurts is really you don't sense a close relationship there still, and that's problematic for Nick. Because as disappointed as people are somewhat with Hurts, I don't think Hurts is going anywhere. So if I were Nick, I'd be working real hard on that. Nick, I don't. I said this to someone else on another podcast. When he showed up, there was that initial press conference that everybody made fun of. I didn't think too much of that. I thought he was just a well-meaning guy who was really young and in his first head coaching job and kind of tripping all over himself. But then when he came out with this stuff about the rock, paper, scissors, where he was gauging competitiveness by how guys responded to playing rock, paper, scissors against him, I was like, really? That's how? Yeah. If I'm a competitive person, I'm going to get upset if I lose to you in rock, paper, scissors. Things like that. But then he went to the Super Bowl. I thought, well, what do I know?
Right.
Hey,
Right.
But I don't know that Nick's a serious person, frankly. He has a vibe and a connection with players because in his heart, I think he's still a player, even though he was never an NFL player. I think he connects generationally with a lot of these guys. He has the strut and all that is kind of emblematic of a lot of his players. But as far as really showing me anything as a strategist, the team is like him, John. It's undisciplined, it's emotional, and it can't get out of its own way. It's just it's not a well-coached team. There's no way Jeffrey Lurie can look at this and think, well, we've had some injuries, but my team is well coached. We do the right things, and we go into games with a good plan we know what the opposition is going to do for us and all this stuff. No, 0-0-0. They just don't. They come out. They're 23-0 in the first quarter of games this year. Yeah. Which you're not looking at the right stuff on the film and getting it across to the players if you can't come out and start a game with anything less than a total disaster.
Yeah, it felt like that Jeffrey Lurie was thinking about moving on from him at the end of last season, but Nick fought for his job. He was willing to concede the offense, bringing in a new offensive coordinator, running a different offense, to where Doug didn't fight for his job and more or less said, oh, well, Press Taylor's my offensive coordinator, we'll be fine. And Jeff got rid of him. The fact that he fought for his job probably was the reason they kept him. It doesn't mean anybody thought that this was actually going to work. I still thought it was going to be a good team. Tim McManus did the piece for ESPN.com back in August, Les, where it detailed the relationship and how it fell apart. And the story ended like this. And when I read the end of the story, I'm like, well, great. Do I think they will go to dinner? And this is talking about Hurts and Nick Sirianni. A team source said this. Do I think they will go to dinner together? Hell no. But it can be a good working relationship, and I don't think it's hatred. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
It's not hatred. Well, that's not going to work, Les.
There are relationships. I don't think Brady and Belichick were ever, dinner buddies or, Aaron Rodgers has never. Aaron Rodgers thinks he's smarter than every coach he ever had. That can work, but it's not optimal. It really isn't. Especially, there's some things that Jalen Hurts needs to correct. And I'm not sure that he listens to Nick about what he needs to correct. I don't know what the answer. I think the whole Brian Johnson thing, I think just from the outside, Brian Johnson was very close to Jalen. Brian Johnson took the fall for last year's offense. And the other thing the ESPN Tim McManus piece pointed out in very vivid terms was that Brian Johnson wasn't running his concepts, wasn't calling his plays, and apparently all season long was sort of shaking his head over all this, and then got fired. And this is Jalen's guy, So it was a mess. And Jeffrey and Howie are pretty smart people, but I really think they kind of got caught up in, well, how will the rest of the league view this if we fire a coach right after going to the Super Bowl? We already did that once.
Did it with Doug. Yep.
Will other coaches want to come here? Will we get a reputation as, people you can't work for? I really think it's almost like that year, and this was a stupid thing as well, where remember 2011 when the Eagles started out 4-8, they won their last 4 games. Jeffrey has a huge press conference at the end of the season and says, I'm going to give Andy one more chance here.
Yep. Remember they beat four.
Okay, one more chance. He'll win the Super Bowl.
They beat 4 bad quarterbacks at the end of that season, like backup quarterbacks to go 8-8. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
No, Les, it's a great point because people that weren't here with Doug, if they just look at it like, hang on, he won the Super Bowl, he went back to the playoffs, and then they fired him after a bad year. Yeah, like that was the right move. It's proven to be the right move. And I think if you would have moved on from Sirianni, it would have proven to be the right move. But again, Jeffrey looks like the knee-jerk reaction owner things collapse, fire him. So now you're waiting a year to more or less do what you probably should have done last year. And that's what this year feels like to me.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true. They can still make this a good season. I mean, I haven't given up on that. I don't think anyone should, but I don't really like the what I'm seeing, and a lot of it is about the defense, frankly. But even though it gets focused on Hurts,
and let's hang on because I got to thank the diehards out there. Thank you very much, diehards. We appreciate you. We love you. So let's talk about the defense.
The people that actually read that stuff that I write on the site. So
I know you do a fantastic job, and you should check out all of Les's contributions here on PHLY. So Vic Fangio was supposed to be the magic elixir, at least for some people out there that thought that, to where this is a talent league. You need more talent. Vic Fangio, of course, should be better than Matt Patricia or should be better than Sean Desai, but you're still running that same defense. And if you don't have the personnel, then you're not going to be great. I just don't know how you go from having such a great effort and such a great performance against the Saints, and then you come back and you play right into their hands. You play off of the receivers. They're just dinking and dunking you to death. Just like in that game against Derek Carr when he was the Raiders, where they just killed you by a 1,000 paper cuts. You don't adjust to it, and they can't tackle. So what do you think other offenses are going to do to you? This defense and Vic Fangio, what a brutal, pathetic performance last week against the Bucs. Just really, really bad.
And it was every bit as bad 2 weeks earlier, when Atlanta, I was really on this after the Atlanta game, and more than I was on Hurts. And people were faulting me for, they only scored 22 points. Atlanta had the ball for 24 minutes and scored 22 points. They can't play nickel. Nickel is like kryptonite to them. They're Superman if they can load up the box. Suddenly they're a great team if the other team doesn't use 3 wideouts. But everybody sees that now. And so guess what they're not going to see is a team that doesn't use 3 wideouts. Why you can't play, why your entire front is paralyzed by having to play 4 down instead of 5, I have no idea. A lot of flack on social media for faulting Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis because Baker Mayfield was getting the ball out very quickly Sunday. But do you have to just disappear if the quarterback is getting the ball out? Can you put your hands up? Can you tackle a running back? You're facing the 29th best running offense in the NFL, and they average 5 yards a carry. Just because the quarterback's getting the ball out, you just have to just stand there and look around all the time. I don't see that. And the secondary, they've made vast improvements in the talent of the secondary. in the offseason. And that is not being reflected in their play at all. They play this incredibly soft zone. Part of the tackling problem is nobody's close to the receiver when he catches the ball. So there's plenty of space for the guy to maneuver and juke and feint. It's like that Avante Maddox missed tackle that everybody has seen 1,000 times. It was a horrible miss, but he's coming all the way across the formation. They snap the ball and he goes flying at the guy.
Yeah.
That's not sound.
No.
No, that should not be the way he was lined up there. It's a mess, and I don't understand why I don't understand why you can't play press coverage with these corners.